The abduction of their 5-year-old daughter would leave a family reeling.
There must be someone out there who knows where she is.
You see them out playing, and you think,
she should be there, and she should be playing.
That image will never, ever leave me. Just then, I was like, oh my God, this is really happening.
The hunt for the schoolgirl would become the largest the country had ever witnessed.
Practically the whole town spent last night and this morning helping the police search.
Some of the search teams and stuff were ordered to stop and go back because they were exhausted. They wouldn't stop.
The actions of the man responsible would outrage the nation.
Mark Bridger has got to be one of the most horrific child murderers that there's ever been.
The murder of April Jones was a crime that shook Britain.
Emergency. I've been kidnapped. Just stay still for me for a moment.
We received a call through to our communication centre, so obviously an emergency call, a 999 call, and that call was made by Coral Jones, Coral being the mother of April.
Oh, she's gone off in a car with somebody. Somebody picked her up in a car or something. Gone panicking, looking. Okay, what's the name of the child that's gone missing? April Jones.
Coral said that her daughter had been abducted, kidnapped, and that she gave a very brief description of a vehicle that had been seen in the vicinity at the time. The communication centre deployed the local officer to attend. We were in the fortunate position that there was an officer working in Machynlleth at that time in the evening, and within about 7 minutes, the first officer was at the scene.
The 999 call made to the police that day started a chain of events that would leave a community in shock and a family distraught.
To that point, it was a very normal day. But our normality ended there, and we haven't had a normal day since, really.
Paul and Coral Jones live with their 3 children, Jasmine, Harley and April, in the small Welsh town of Machynlleth. Like most families, Monday morning that October began with breakfast for the children.
I get up in the morning, I generally get Harley and April up. And that morning I got April up as per usual and sat her on the bed with you, give Harley a shout, go downstairs and do breakfasts. It was a normal day. I mean, I've done it, what, 300 or 400 times easily, like, yeah. And I set her off to school that morning. We went shopping that afternoon.
After school, 5-year-old April Jones visited the local leisure centre with her family for her weekly swimming lesson before heading home.
I can see it there, her and her friend, as Coral actually rang me up and says, can you do them a little something to eat? So I did them both spaghetti and toast because it was quick and they were on the way home. 2 pieces of toast each and a tin of spaghetti between them, and they both finished it. To me, I was really surprised because she's got quite a small appetite, quite a petite little thing, and she'd ate the whole lot. I was ever so pleased. I can still see that dinner there. I can still smell that.
Shortly after dinner, April joined her friend outside to play.
we let her stay out longer because she had a good school report because we went in that day.
She did have her school report and she did fantastic.
What actually happened to April is still a mystery. However, her parents quickly realised that something was terribly wrong.
We sent Harley to go and get her, but he came back screaming.
He screamed that they've got her, he's taken her or somebody's taken her. She's gone off in a car, a van. He wasn't too sure, but he was hysterical. And then Coral started flapping, and there's people coming out, and it just went into It was just such a crazy scene, and it all just went so surreal until the police showed up and started putting a bit of normality into it.
In terms of that initial attendance, the officer was faced with a fairly stressful, chaotic situation. Clearly you had a traumatised family. Neighbours were alerted to April's disappearance at that time, and in fairness to the officer had to try and find out as much information as possible that she could relay back to our communication centre, at the same time try and manage the family and, by that time, the wider community who were becoming aware of April's disappearance and the anxiety around that.
In the midst of the chaos, Coral Jones began to contact other family members.
Let's phone up Jazz. She was in youth club. So she was hysterical as well.
I didn't know what was going on. I just got out, through everything. I was like, I've got to go. Ran home, and then I thought, this isn't real, this isn't real.
She was hysterical. She ran, she came straight back, and by which time now there was crowds of people gathering, and they were actually knocking on doors around the estate. They were knocking on doors, they were searching. You could see people with torches now. It's about 8 o'clock at night, and it's just starting to go dark. And there was people with torches. You could see them going around, checking the alleys, the garages.
As the word spread about the missing girl, the community rallied and began to search for April.
I think what we have to factor into this inquiry, and indeed modern day investigations, is the use of social media. It was evident very quickly following April's disappearance that that information was shared, and that obviously resulted in a number of members from within the community volunteering themselves, bringing themselves forward to assist with the search for April.
Just to update you, we're going to get everybody out searching in the next few minutes.
Diliodd Mark turned out to go and help to look for April. We had friends from Aberystwyth, we had friends from further apart. I mean, everybody, even people we didn't know, they came.
People were just coming from everywhere, South Wales, North Wales. I was having messages from relatives all over the UK and stuff like that, asking, is there anything they could do? There was a man, and he'd come all the way from Manchester that evening just to help find. He was like asking us, where do you want me to go? And we were like, well, if you stay with local people, at least, you know where you're going.
Residents began to mobilise. Some set up their own search parties. Others drove off into neighbouring hills to check forest trails and lanes.
It was a testimony to the locals and the people that come around. The amount they did in the time they had was just astounding.
We were driving around, we were going through every kind of, shortcut little route that you knew there was around here, because there's hundreds of them. And then we met up with Coral in the car. Someone else was driving a car, and just the look on her face, that image will never, ever leave me. And I just then, I was like, oh my God, this is really happening.
With April being 5 years old, very vulnerable, missing from about 7:30 p.m. in the evening, we knew it was weather-wise, it had been raining, it was dark, it was cold. The fast-track action was, for us at that point, was certainly to find April safe and well. We knew from previous research that if April had been abducted or kidnapped, we would have been unsure at that point in time what the motive was. But, we knew that we had very little time to play with in terms of finding April safe and well.
I wasn't really allowed to go out into the mountains with other people, just in case you did see something. So I thought the only thing I could do, because I didn't want to go home and just sit there and be like, playing my fingers, just waiting. So I thought, best thing I could do, go out with my friend, put posters up in bus stops, shops, lampposts, everything we could think of, really.
Some of the search teams and stuff were ordered to stop. They wouldn't stop, and they were ordered to stop and go back because they were exhausted. They wouldn't stop. And it's the same with the locals. They wouldn't stop. They were out there for hours, right through the night, several of them, right through the night searching.
To look at it now, it's surprising how many people helped to look for April.
As the desperate search continued, the police investigation centred on possible eyewitnesses to the abduction.
We knew that April had been out playing in the estate with some other young children on their bicycles, and obviously that was a sort of main line of inquiry in trying to ascertain as much detail as we could about what they did, who they were with, and any of the other children who may have seen something.
Luckily, the detectives were able to identify a child who was actually present at the moment when April disappeared.
The witness was a young 7-year-old child, actually a friend of April, who was with April at the time on her bicycle. And the evidence presented by the friend was to the effect that she had actually witnessed seeing April getting into a vehicle.
Once she relayed the message over that she got in the wrong side, and somebody said perhaps it's a left-hand drive, everybody went, we know it is. In fact, I think 90% of the town probably knew it was the minute you said left-hand drive.
This small, seemingly inconsequential piece of information would prove vital to the investigation. Left-hand drive vehicles were rare in Machynlleth, and in fact, the locals could only think of one person who owned one. In October 2012, the nation was stunned by news of the abduction of schoolgirl April Jones. As the media descended on her hometown, the whole country was desperate to know more about the missing 5-year-old girl and what had happened to her.
Well, she was born premature, by 7 weeks. She fought for her life from word go. She was rushed to Swansea to intensive care there for over a week and a half, and then she had a fit in intensive care, which led on to her to have cerebral palsy down her left-hand side from the hip down to her leg.
She had a lot of pain with her leg with the cerebral palsy, and she was very determined to get up and do something even when her leg wouldn't let her. So one of the things we did from the beginning was actually teach her to ride a bike at the age of 3.5, which gave her mobility to get around, and she loved that bike and she went everywhere on it.
Whatever you were doing, she had to be in on it. You couldn't sit and watch a film without her being in on it. You couldn't play on your laptop without her having to see what you were doing or having a go. She's always smiling, laughing, interested in everything.
I mean, when she was in a lot of pain, she'd cry, sat on the stairs. Harley or Jazz would come and get her, carry her upstairs, and then carry her back down.
She'd come in from school, like, I would fetch her, bring her in from school, and she'd nearly always sit on your lap, stick her arms around you, give you a cuddle, kiss, say, I love you, Dad. And she was a very loving kid, very, very loving.
April Jones lived with her mum and dad, as well as her sister Jasmine and brother Harley, in Machynlleth, a small town in the Cambrian Mountains.
April lived on a small housing estate within the town itself, and I think it's true to say that, you know, the majority of the people living within that community would have felt quite confident and comfortable with their children out playing in the streets, in parks, etc.
It's just a community where you know everyone because it's so small, but, you know, everyone gets along. Everyone has their fallings out as well, but they usually get resolved. There's no, you know, and it's just quiet life more than anything else.
On the 1st of October, this tranquility was shattered when young April was snatched while playing outside with her friends. Worse was to come, however, when the spotlight began to fall not on a predatory outsider, but a member of the close-knit community.
Mark Bridger became a person of interest during the early hours of the 2nd of October. What is interesting there is obviously when you are seeking information within the community, speaking to neighbours, friends, you know, it's the importance of ascertaining exactly what they saw, who they saw, because an individual such as Mark Bridger did not look unfamiliar within the community.
None of us expected this. In fact, none of us knew that Mark Bridger could turn into something like that. So yeah, it was an incredible shock for us and the nation, I think.
Back at the leisure centre where the search is being coordinated, word has got around as to the identity of the man.
As the largest search in British policing history got underway, back at home, the Jones family were doing their best to cope with the appalling situation.
They said you couldn't go out, it wasn't safe for you to go out. Yeah, sitting at home, locking yourself at home whilst everybody else is running around, and you can't go out and do anything, it is difficult. Yeah, but you couldn't do anything. Yeah, everybody was out there doing something for you. I mean, for us to go out and try and do something, it was almost pointless. It's just you wanted to do something.
Despite trying to remain positive, the moment that Paul Jones realised his daughter was gone forever still remains clear in his mind.
10:33 on the 1st of October 2012. I was standing outside by the back gate, and there's a weird feeling just for a split second, and it's almost like your heart stops. And you can't explain it. It just drops to your stomach, and it bounces back up, and you can't explain it. I can't explain it, but I knew she wasn't there.
My friend's got a son, same age as my daughter, which they play together. And it's like, now, you see them out playing, and you think...
She should be there. She should be playing.
Meanwhile, police were building up a picture of the individual who was quickly becoming the prime suspect.
Well, Mark Bridger was an individual who lived in the community for a number of years. His children lived in the community, went to the same school as April and some of April's family.
There must be someone out there who knows where she is.
From a policing perspective, he was not on our radar. He was not somebody that we considered to be a risk and was not managed or monitored by us for any reason. In terms of his previous offending, you know, there were minor offences that he'd been found guilty of, but nothing to the extent that would have raised his profile from our perspective.
46-year-old Mark Bridger was a father of 6 children. He had lived in Machynlleth for a number of years, but prior to that was something of a drifter with a history of broken relationships. The day before the abduction, Bridger had split up from his partner and had spent the day at his cottage contacting several women online, but also engaging in his other obsession, downloading and viewing child pornography.
From the inquiries that we undertook then in terms of establishing Mark Bridger's movements leading up to the time of the abduction, we established that there'd been a breakdown in his relationship. There's clearly evidence that Mark Bridger was trying to form other relationships with other people. And clearly from the evidence we gathered from his personal computer, laptop, you know, there's evidence of him having accessed pornography, child pornography, in the time leading up to the events of the 1st of October.
There are factors that would make someone a higher risk than someone else, and it might seem counterintuitive, but you may have one individual that's got no previous convictions, no other indications of antisocial behaviour at all, and has thousands of images of children, but no previous convictions, no antisocial behaviour, versus someone else that has got a very lengthy history of previous convictions for all kinds of things, and actually not necessarily, and quite often not, sex offences. Might have burglary, theft, acquisitive crime, violent crime, etc., etc., that's got 3 or 4 images of children. That individual would most certainly be more dangerous.
Former slaughterhouse worker Mark Bridger's criminal record dates back over 25 years and includes convictions for theft and possession of a firearm. Tellingly, he was never considered a threat to children or convicted of a sexual offence.
Mark Bridger does have the classic profile that we would expect to see in relation to use of indecent images and contact offending, and without obviously going into the details of how he would be processed, he absolutely, most certainly would come up as a very high-risk offender. We've got several instances here of a sort of botched firearms robbery attempt when he was younger. Several indications that he was violent with partners. Also, the indications around his drinking behaviour, which, as we all know, lowers our threshold of restraint. So there's several indications in Bridger's history that would make him absolutely, definitely high risk.
Overnight, detectives had confirmed that the owner of the left-hand drive car was Mark Bridger. Coincidentally, on the morning of the 2nd of October, he was spotted by a police helicopter whilst out walking his dog.
At that point in time, when the police helicopter captured Mark Bridger walking just near his home, at that point in time, he was not actively being sought by us as a suspect. He was in the system as far as a person of interest was concerned. But in fairness to the staff working and flying that helicopter, at that point in time, they wouldn't have been actively seeking the individual. It was purely his demeanour, his actions on the ground that drew the attention of the flying crew. I think it is fair to say that normally with a helicopter hovering above, the normal reaction would be to look up. That wasn't the case with Mark Bridger. He was very much focused on looking at his dog and walking, and I think it was on that basis that drew the attention of the helicopter crew.
The net was closing in on Mark Bridger, and on the 2nd of October, officers visited his cottage just a few miles outside Mahuntleth. What they found there would confirm their worst fears. In October 2012, the Welsh town of Mahuntleth was rocked by the disappearance of 5-year-old April Jones. Police suspicion was focused on local man Mark Bridger, whose vehicle was seen in the area at the time April went missing. As police concerns grew about April's safety, the decision was taken to track Bridger down and arrest him.
A number of teams of officers were deployed to a number of potential addresses in order to find him as quickly as possible. The address that we then later established was his home address, his most recent home address, was attended to by a number of officers who entered the property. At that time, Mark Bridger could not be located, but part of that search as well was obviously to look for April at that point in time, hoping that we would have found April safe and well. The officers in attendance did notice, firstly, that it was extremely hot within the home. There was a roaring fire in the house, and also a very strong smell of detergent, something similar to bleach. Officers eventually located Mark Bridger on the main road between Mahuntleth and his home in Cainws, and it was at that point that he was challenged on the roadside and detained and arrested by police.
Detectives had been looking for the man in question since last night. He was arrested as he walked along a roadside in the area from where April disappeared.
It was quite scary because he was the sort of person you'd be like, hey, you're right to when you walk down the street. I didn't know him well enough, but I'd say, you know, hello to him. And when his picture popped up on TV, I was like, I know that guy. Seen him around town. He's a local person.
To the surprise of the arresting officers, Mark Bridger admitted he was indeed implicated in April's disappearance and could provide an account of what happened to her.
He was fairly calm in his demeanour at that time, and he disclosed to officers that he'd been involved in an accident, that he'd, as a result, caused injuries to April Jones as a result of a collision that he had with her while she was on her bike in the area where we believe the abduction took place.
He said he knocked her over by the car. With his Land Rover, said he knocked her over, picked her up.
He'd placed April in his vehicle, that because of her injuries, he tried to provide her with CPR, sort of revive her. Unfortunately failed to do so, had panicked and driven off.
Despite Bridger's admission, police and the Jones family were no nearer to finding out where April was.
We've seen people still out looking, using their torches, and police sniffer dog teams have been deployed.
We were disputing the account in terms that Mark Bridger had given us. We didn't believe his version of events, but that said, he had clearly indicated that April was dead, that he was responsible for the death, and on that basis I felt it was absolutely the right thing to do in sharing that information with the family.
The police did tell us everything, and that's what we really appreciated. They never kept us in the dark on nothing.
Mark Bridger was in custody. He was accepting that he was responsible for April's death. However, we had not found April. The search was a main line of inquiry for us, the search for April, or indeed any other evidence that could have linked us to April. And, you know, it was so important that we didn't lose sight of that.
By early morning, they were handing out leaflets with April's image on them.
Thank you, pop it in the window.
We had to proceed with trying to find April.
As well as the countryside surrounding the town, one of the main areas of the police investigation to try to find April was at Bridger's home. And after intricate forensic work, the cottage began to give up its secrets.
The cottage, obviously that was subject of an intense and extensive forensic examination. And what was gleaned as a result of that was there was evidence of a clean-up at the property, particularly in the bathroom area. And the other key piece of evidence, obviously, was in respect of the remains which were recovered from the hearth and the fire, which were subject of some very, very detailed examinations forensically, and which we believe are those remains of April Jones.
Tellingly, forensic officers also found traces of blood throughout the cottage.
There were a number of different particles found at various locations in the living room, bathroom and hallway area. But in particular, there was one particle of blood which was far more substantial than the others that were located, and that was very near to the hearth in the vicinity of where the fire was. And obviously that was significant from our perspective in terms of determining that April had suffered some significant harm while she was present in that house.
The first piece of evidence, major evidence, come back to us was there was a puddle of blood on the floor.
A bit more than a puddle.
Yeah, and I said, how significant is that puddle of blood? And Dave, our FLO, says it's not something you get back up from. And that night I put myself to bed at 5:30 and I cried myself silly till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I actually soaked my pillow right through. I cried that hard. And that was it for me.
As well as the awful evidence of what had happened in the cottage, detectives began to get an insight into the evil obsessions of Mark Bridger.
We identified from the examinations of the computer that Mark Bridger was accessing pornography, child pornography in particular, and also had an unhealthy interest in searching a number of sites which revealed information about previous horrific child murders, both in the UK and further afield abroad.
This evidence confirmed detectives' worst fears. They were dealing with a predatory paedophile. Recent research into this type of crime has revealed a worrying statistic.
The reality is there's a significant number of men that are interested in children, and there's a significant number, albeit a small number, of men that would act on that impulse. The best estimates on prevalence rates around paedophilia in the UK is between 1 and 3%, or 1 in every 100 men will have a paedophilic interest in children.
He put on the internet naked 5-year-old and it came up. On his computer he had cartoons of a kid being molested by an adult. He had pictures of other children. He had pictures of my other daughter, Jasmine, and April. And he tried to say that he didn't know April, but they were there with my other daughter, Jasmine. You know, it makes you shiver through your whole body because you don't know who's taking your photos off the internet.
It would later emerge that Bridger had previously contacted April's sister online.
He sent me a friend request and I asked Dad and I was like, well, who's Mark Bridger? Because I didn't know him by his name. And I was like, message him like, who are you? Why are you adding me? And he kept saying, I'm friends with your dad. I was like, but doesn't mean I know you. You know, just because you're friends with him, why are you contacting me? I'm a lot younger than you. And I thought, no, just delete it, not bothering. As
I said to Jasmine, I said, why would somebody who very vaguely knows me want to request friends with you? At the time, I'm not sure, 14-year-old. A 14-year-old against a 42-year-old, I'm guessing the age is a little bit. I said, there's no common ground for you, like. So I suggest saying no, but she's already made up her mind no anyhow.
Whilst it seems abhorrent, studies have attempted to explain why some men are attracted to images of child abuse online.
There's two schools of thoughts about the relationship between internet use and indecent images and contact offending. One is the so-called compensation model, where what you have is an offender that downloads and uses images on the net as a device to stop his contact offending. So this is instead of contact offending. So that's a compensation model. The other model is what's called the behavioural facilitation model, where actually the internet is used as an outlet for fantasies, but with it repeated use, those you get inured to them or used to them, or they start to become more bland, so you need something more. Bridger definitely fits into the behavioural facilitation model, where you've got someone that's highly impulsive, got many pre-convictions, general antisocial lifestyle, sexual interest in quite young children, and inevitably that use of the internet at some point for Bridger became not enough.
Despite the evidence mounting against him, in police custody, Mark Bridger was giving little away.
He was interviewed in excess of 18 hours. There were 13 interviews. Mark Bridger was somebody who was very comfortable in speaking when the matters being discussed were areas that he was comfortable with to talk about. But obviously when he was being challenged about the evidence that we were being presented with and that we were finding, he would then start to lose that control and would become visually upset. And that was very much the common theme throughout the interview process. In terms of us trying to build up a profile of what we were dealing with, the type of individual we were dealing with, obviously we had a significant amount of support during the interview process by a number of experts in the field, and that was very useful in terms of informing the interview strategy going forward to try and capture as much evidence as we could. Because clearly Mark Bridger to this day has never told us exactly what has happened to April Jones.
Despite his refusal to tell the truth, the case against Bridger was gaining momentum. Days later, he was charged with April's abduction and murder. Five-year-old April Jones was abducted near her home whilst playing with friends in October 2012. The person police believed was responsible was local man Mark Bridger, and in the spring of 2013, he was due to face trial, charged with April's abduction and murder.
The trial took place at Mold Crown Court from late April to early May in 2013. It was scheduled for 5 weeks.
The start of the judicial process in this case had drawn some local people and a lot of strong feeling.
We knew that, given the profile of the investigation, that it would be monitored very closely by the media. So there were some real challenges from us, from a policing perspective, in terms of managing the family through the trial.
I wanted to be there. I mean, we were told we don't have to go, but I wanted to be there. I wanted him to see us, and I wanted to see him, and I just stared at him. He didn't look at us, he looked at us once, didn't he?
It wasn't a look like it's a full-on glare. He just dipped his head and just looked through the side of his eye to the right, just for a few seconds, and he straightened up. Other than that, he never glanced our way once.
Throughout the course of the trial, obviously, he gave his version of events. He took the opportunity to stand in the box and give his version of events. But throughout, again, very much in control, in denial, total denial, and, you know, very cold sort of individual who never seemed to understand the seriousness of what he was doing or what he'd done.
What made me really cringe was he had the cheek to say little April, and that just made my blood boil.
Like it was his little girl, and it was his love, his joy, and it did make us really cringe.
He said he knocked her over by accident and picked her and put her somewhere, but as soon as the police said some stuff about the blood, about the evidence, he would change his story.
I wasn't confident of a guilty verdict. I knew that from an investigation perspective, we gathered all the evidence possible, with the exception of locating April Jones. We had some really strong forensic evidence. We had some strong evidence from the mobile phone and from his laptop, coupled with some extremely significant and good witnesses who were able to present evidence to the court and the jury.
Some of the evidence that they showed is like images of children, naked children, cartoon pictures of children being molested.
Some of the stuff he had on there, he was trying to say that it was beneficial to show his kids the different stages
of puberty,
of growing up from a young child and coming through puberty to an adult. And he was actually trying to convince the jury that the reason he had these nearly 400 images on his computers partly to do with that. He lived in his own little world.
It was only during the trial, as all the evidence was heard, that a tragic picture of what actually happened to April could be put together.
You know, it's very difficult to be 100% certain in terms of what actually happened to April, but based on the evidence, what we know is that April was abducted from the estate that she lived on at about 7:30, that she's driven away from the scene. From some of the CCTV evidence that we've captured and produced in evidence, we know that Mark Bridger has travelled out of Machynlleth towards his home address. We believe that he has then gone directly to his home address. We know from the forensic evidence and what we've recovered from his home in Cainws that April suffered significant harm at that home address. Everything points towards the fact that parts of April's remains have been recovered from the hearth, from the fire, and on that basis, you know, April has suffered some significant injuries as well. What has happened beyond that point, we cannot be sure, but you know, it would be my view that other remains then may have been disposed of at various locations, you know, in the area of Cainws, because there were a number of hours, obviously, between the time of the abduction and the time that Mark Bridger was arrested, for him to have had the opportunity to dispose of those remains.
On Thursday, the 30th of May, Mark Bridger was found guilty of abducting and murdering April Jones, and of disposing of, concealing or destroying her body.
Mark Bridger has received a whole life sentence, which essentially means that he will spend the rest of his life in prison. When you look at the seriousness and the gravity of the offences for which he's being convicted, then it has to be right that a person of Mark Bridger's capability spends the rest of his life in prison so that the wider public can be protected from the significant risks that he poses.
The sentence he's got is the most that anyone can ever have, but I think everyone would want more. No one wants this. No one wants to see their friends go through the most horrible thing in the world. I mean, for Paul and Coral to be able to sit in that court, they're a million more the person than I am, because I couldn't have done it. They're amazing for the strength that they've shown.
In terms of Mark Bridger, I described him following the outcome of the Crown Court trial as an evil and manipulative individual. He abducted and murdered April and has then gone to enormous lengths to destroy evidence, conceal his involvement and avoid detection. In terms of seriousness, then, you know, Mark Bridger has got to be one of the most horrific child murderers that there's ever been.
In the wake of Bridger's conviction, Paul and Coral Jones have campaigned for tougher sentences for those convicted of sex offences against children. And they've also called for internet providers to restrict access to images of child abuse on the web. Their campaign, in their daughter's name, is called April's Law.
We don't want April's life to be a total waste. I mean, we've got our memories and stuff, but we find ourselves in the situation where people will listen to us or sympathise with us. And so I think in April's memory, we should try and push the law and make make the general public aware of the paedophiles that are out there and keep other children safe. And then on the long term, perhaps we can actually save lives.
That's all we're asking for. Not major changes. What I'm hoping to get is longer sentences, harder sentences. Once they're put on the sex offender list, they're on it for life, not come off it in like 6 years' time or 5 years' time. They need to be put on it for life.
Well, I'd like to see things put in place that will stop paedophiles from downloading these images.
The government needs to step in and help and stop all this before any more family go through what we've gone through and some other families have gone through.
And the way I see it, the internet sites are a big playground for paedophiles.
The reality of the internet is what we enjoy about it is its kind of freedom and, in a way, its lack of control and restraint, which in obviously many ways is quite a good thing because, you know, obviously you don't want to live in an environment where the press is restricted. But on the other hand, the advantage of that is also its disadvantage in that it's incredibly difficult to control. And a lot of these images, you know, are constructed by paedophiles and then shared on peer-to-peer networks.
In November 2014, Mark Bridges' home was bought by the Welsh Government and demolished.
It's just like a big relief. The house is gone, so if you go past it, you don't think, oh my God, that's where April Jones got killed, got murdered. When we go past it, your head doesn't turn to look at it, because you automatically turn your head as you go past just to look. You know it's there, but now it's gone, you can't see nothing. It's just blank, and it is relief.
On the 26th of September 2013, just 5 days short of the anniversary of the day she went missing, the town of Machynlleth gathered for the funeral of April Jones.
At the gates of St Peter's Church, the comforting arms of the vicar, ahead of a service no parent should endure.
Whenever I think of April, I just remember a time I'd gone to Paul and Coral's for a coffee, and she was peeking her head around the sofa, and she just, because she was quite shy and quiet, a bit cheeky, and she had this cheeky smile, and she obviously wanted to show me, I think it was a new doll that she had, and just this little smile from around the sofa, and as soon as I hear her name, that's the image I see straight away.
I shared a room with April, so obviously in the morning you get up and you're thinking, for that split second you're like, ah, normal. Then you turn around and you're like, ah, no, she's not there. You know, she's not in her bed or waking you up. She's not in everything you do. So you do think of it, because you could be watching a film, you're thinking, oh yeah, April would like this. So she's constantly on your thoughts of everything you do.
So I like her when she's going to wake Jasmine up because they share the same bedroom. So Jasmine used to open the quilt and say, come on then, come in. Sometimes she wanted to cuddle. And Harley was just, they were like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. You just could hear them laughing and screaming with fun. And that's how we remember her, a happy child.
A lasting image for me was only a few weeks before, there was a double rainbow just outside the back of our house. And as she came out the door, she just squealed, Envis, Envis. And Envis is Welsh for rainbow. And she says, and she just jumped up and down and pointed, 2 rainbows, Envis, Envis. I mean, it was just a sheer joy. She jumped up and down on the spot, squealing it. And that's the kind of girl she was.
The abduction of their 5-year-old daughter would leave a family reeling.
There must be someone out there who knows where she is.
You see them out playing, and you think,
she should be there, and she should be playing.
That image will never, ever leave me. Just then, I was like, oh my God, this is really happening.
The hunt for the schoolgirl would become the largest the country had ever witnessed.
Practically the whole town spent last night and this morning helping the police search.
Some of the search teams and stuff were ordered to stop and go back because they were exhausted. They wouldn't stop.
The actions of the man responsible would outrage the nation.
Mark Bridger has got to be one of the most horrific child murderers that there's ever been.
The murder of April Jones was a crime that shook Britain.
We received a call through to our communication centre, so obviously an emergency call, a 999 call, and that call was made by Coral Jones, Coral being the mother of April.
Oh, she's gone off in a car with somebody. Somebody's picked up in a car or something. So I'm panicking, looking. Okay, what's the name of the child that's gone missing? April Jones.
Coral said that her daughter had been abducted, kidnapped, and that she gave a very brief description of a vehicle that had been seen in the vicinity at the time. The communication centre deployed the local officer to attend. We were in the fortunate position that there was an officer working in Machynlleth at that time in the evening, and within about 7 minutes, the first officer was at the scene.
The 999 call made to the police that day started a chain of events that would leave a community in shock and a family distraught.
To that point, it was a very normal day, but our normality ended there, and we haven't had a normal day since, really.
Paul and Coral Jones live with their 3 children, Jasmine, Harley and April, in the small Welsh town of Machynlleth. Like most families, Monday morning that October began with breakfast for the children.
I get up in the morning, I generally get Harley and April up. And that morning I got April up as per usual and sat her on the bed with you, give Harley a shout, go downstairs and do breakfasts. It was a normal day. I mean, I've done it, what, 300 or 400 times easily, like, yeah. And I set her off to school that morning. We went shopping that afternoon.
After school, 5-year-old April Jones visited the local leisure centre with her family for her weekly swimming lesson before heading home.
I can see it there, her and her friend, as Coral actually rang me up and says, can you do them a little something to eat? So I did them both spaghetti and toast because it was quick and they were on the way home. 2 pieces of toast each and a tin of spaghetti between them, and they both finished it. To me, I was really surprised because she's got quite a small appetite, a petite little thing, and she'd ate the whole lot. I was ever so pleased. I can still see that dinner there. I can still smell that.
Shortly after dinner, April joined her friend outside to play.
We let her stay out longer because she had a good school report because we went in that day.
She did have her school report and she did fantastic.
What actually happened to April is still a mystery. However, her parents